the difference. Radio 786.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته and a very warm welcome to On the Couch on Radio 786. On the Couch aims to unpack, deal, discuss issues that we don't always want to address, but issues that most certainly affects you or those close to you. So let's hear the difference here on Radio 786 on 100.4 FM. Now, on the couch, of course, today it's Thursday, so we have our weekly advice assembly. And what is an advice assembly? An advice assembly is usually a weekly meeting for tenants, occupiers and activists hosted by Reclaim the City and Notywala. It is a space to learn about eviction law and also our rights and responsibilities as tenants, and to stand in solidarity to prevent and resist unlawful evictions and unfair landlord practices. Social solidarity and sharing knowledge is even more essential now in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic and massive economic hardships facing the country. Now, during this weekly on-air advice assembly, we will cover topics such as what the current position is on evictions now that the state of disaster has come to an end, tenants who cannot pay rent and want to do and what to do as both tenant and landlord. Also looking at an unlawful eviction, what to do, and also what happens if you are being unlawfully evicted, various ways of how your landlord can harass you, and what can be done about them cutting services such as water supply or your electricity, for instance. And then, of course, some responsibilities of bodies like the police, the court, and the rental housing tribunal, where you can seek help if these institutions can't or won't help. And then, lastly, we'll also focus on early cancellations of a lease by the landlord or the tenant, and then rent getting more expensive while people have lost income and face rising costs of living. All that and more here on Radio 786, and of course during our weekly assembly here on a Thursday evening between 5 and 6 here on the couch. This evening our focus is basically on the courts that have granted an eviction, what options are available, and also looking at registering on the housing waiting list. In studio with me, I'm very pleased to be joined by facilitators Axolile Notywala, and he's from Movement for Care, as well as Karen Hendricks, who is from Reclaim the City. Welcome and thanks so much for your time, and thanks so much for joining me this evening.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having us.
Now, we've been sketching the scenario of Megan for the last couple of weeks, and this week we're looking particularly at something different. We're looking at the fact that during COVID-19 we have seen a number of new occupations in the Western Cape and also long queues of unhoused people queuing up for meals. Now, the Western Cape recorded 600,000 households registered on the Housing Needs Register, which is a database of people who qualify for and require state assistance securing a home. Now, more than 365,000 of those households are attributable to the city of Cape Town. Clearly, the need is absolutely great. Now, when we speak about what exactly should someone do if they are facing an eviction and can't find housing for themselves on the open market, I'd like to at this point also just remind the listeners that you can be part of the discussion. You can give us a call or WhatsApp us your comments, your questions to 0786 10 11 12 or 021 699 1786. Now, let's then ask the question, what should someone do if they are facing an eviction and can't find housing for themselves on the open market? Karen, maybe we start with you.
So, good evening, Zainab, and good evening to the listeners. So, when someone is facing an eviction, a lawful eviction is a 9-step process. And so, when someone is facing an eviction, the first step in any eviction matter would be meaningful engagement. So, meaningful engagement needs to take place between the landlord and the tenant. And thereafter, the rest of the lawful eviction process follows, like the notice to vacate and the notice of motion, and all the court documents that a tenant would receive if meaningful engagement cannot further take place between the landlord and the tenant. It then becomes a matter of the court.
You want to add to that, Axolile?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you are faced with an eviction, I think the steps that Comrade Karen has spoken about are important. But also, I think for people that do not necessarily sometimes have legal advice, is to seek that advice, whether you're seeking it from a lawyer or you're seeking it from organizations such as Reclaim the City and Difuna Ugwazi, and the assistance that may come with that.
0216991786 or 0786101112. We are particularly focusing on registering on the housing waiting list and also looking at the courts that have granted an eviction, what options are available. Now, what needs to be taken into consideration before you can receive any housing opportunity or housing subsidy from the government? What are the things that must be taken into consideration, Karen?
So, first of all, there is certain criteria which a tenant or someone who's seeking housing from government or otherwise should have. And so first of all, for example, one of those criteria would be for someone to be a permanent South African citizen or resident, for someone to be legally competent to enter into a contract, to be married or cohabiting or have dependents, for people who are 60 and who have disabilities, and then also for people to be over the age of 18. Those are the kinds of criteria that one would be looking at. And then also to have a combined income of less than 3,500 per month to qualify for state subsidized housing. And lastly, for someone never to have owned property or state subsidized housing.
Okay. Now, how does one get on the housing needs register list?
So firstly, one has to apply to the city's deep housing departments.
Meeting the criteria that you went through now.
So using the criteria that I just mentioned now, one has to approach the city's human settlements or the housing department at the civic centre.
Axolile, would you like to comment?
There are also some options online where you can register on the city's city's website in terms of the housing list. But I think as you've mentioned, like the list is long and the list seemingly keeps growing. And therefore some people
wait forever.
Feel like there's sometimes no need because you've been waiting and hence we've been seeing everything that has been happening around, whether it's land occupations or like the struggles that NU and RTC have been leading around social and affordable housing. So that's one of the difficulties and the challenges with the housing list.
And many people that I've come across before have been waiting on the list for many years. But now, what is the criteria when choosing and selecting people for accommodation? How do they make the decision to choose people on the list? Is it if you're on top of the list, or what is it?
It's become a complex and difficult process. I think there's many administrative issues within the different levels of government, because originally housing was a national and provincial provincial level competent, so local government wasn't necessarily able to provide housing, but some of the local governments, such as metros and the city of Cape Town, are now accredited. And so there's all these different levels where you can apply. You can apply locally, you can apply nationally. And those administrative issues are some of what cause the problems. It's supposed to be a first come, first served basis. So those that are at the top of the list are supposed to be given housing. But if, for example, you look at an informal settlement and people living in an informal settlement, when you look at the whole population, you find that some of the people have applied, but some of the people have not applied on the housing list. So if development is to happen within that particular informal settlement, it becomes then a challenge to say, okay, some of you are going to get housing, some of you are not going to get housing. What's going to happen to those that are not going to get housing? Then it goes back to that issue of land, because if they have to be relocated, you have to find the land. It then also conflicts with a program called the Upgrading of Informal Settlements program, which, if that particular program, everyone has to benefit from that development. So it might be people that are on the housing list, it might be people that are not on the housing list. So there's all these complexities that come with this issue of the housing list.
You're listening to Radio 786 broadcasting 100.4 FM. This is On the Couch and our weekly advice assembly with Reclaim the City and Nifuna Kwazi in studio. I have Axolile Notywala from Movement for Care, as well as Karen Hendricks from Reclaim the City. And our lines are open, and also our WhatsApp line for you to comment and question on 0786 1011 12 or 021 699 1786. Now, here's a question on a WhatsApp that reads, with regards to housing, right? One of the criteria is that you should never have owned a home. But what if you lost your house due to you losing your job? Does this mean that you do not qualify because you previously owned a home?
It would mean that you do not qualify because you have. But I'm sure, I think some of the reasons why these advice assemblies are set out are for those reasons. You can try and find assistance and seek legal advice in terms of that. And maybe you might be able to negotiate and explain how you do not currently have a house.
And then, of course, there's also an important note that different housing opportunities have different additional criteria. So if it would be advisable for listeners to familiarize themselves with, obviously, the allocation policy. But speak to us about the different housing opportunities and the different criteria that apply for these different housing opportunities.
So people can log on to the Housing Needs Register, as Axolile said, via the Cities of Cape Town's website. They can visit their local housing offices. There's 29 of these facilities which are scattered around Cape Town. These include the offices in Wales Street in the CBD, Athlone, Bonteheuwel, Gugulethu, Langa and Mitchell's Plain. And then you can also SMS your 13-digit ID number followed by a space and your surname to 44108. And more of these options that one could access are available on the city's websites.
Okay. Axolile?
Yeah, and some of these options I've mentioned, I spoke about the Upgrading of Informal Settlements program as one. You can also apply, and some of the struggles again by Nifuna Kwazi and Reclaim the City for social housing. That's another opportunity. The other one is the Breaking New Ground, which is a state subsidized housing. And then there's also city-owned rental accommodation that's available.
Now, when you do go onto the website in terms and you want to go and register and so forth, and we mentioned that they have about 29 housing offices across the city, but what would you need in order to register?
You need to have an ID,
okay.
And then there's a form that you would need to fill. You also need to have identity documents for everyone that you might be living with, whether it's your spouse or your children. That means birth certificates, and any information for people that are with special needs. For example, if there are any people that are living with disabilities, you need to provide that information, because the processes allow that there's priorities for certain people and certain age groups. So that information is important.
Okay. And then also you must have a completed housing assistance form. Where does one get this particular form?
So these would be available in the municipality, and I think you can find it also on the city's website if you are able to go on the internet and print it. But you can get it directly in one of these offices of the municipality.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then we have another question here on a WhatsApp on 0786101112. What are the conditions of the houses or the accommodation that is offered to those on the housing list?
So that's not an easy answer that's not an easy question to answer, because I think it depends on the type of development that is provided. But I think what is important is that when there is such a development, it's important for the community to be involved, because there's normally steering committees that are set up for certain developments, so that those steering committees can assist in checking the conditions and the quality. We have had and seen cases where once a house is built, it crumbles. And that's either due to weak material that is being used, and that can be either because of corruption or misappropriation of funds. And hence, it's important for people to be able to monitor. But quality, normally the quality is good quality that is provided.
In which particular areas would one find that the people go to that is on the housing list?
Sorry, can you repeat?
The areas. Which areas are the accommodations that people find that are on the list?
So at this moment, Zainab, that is very, very hard to tell because of this overburdened housing backlog. And Cape Town really, and this is the crux of the matter and the honesty, is that Cape Town is in a housing crisis. And this housing crisis is deepening and it's becoming worse. And the housing that thus far has been available to poor and working class people who are in need of housing, many of whom are on the housing waiting list for decades, is either built on the periphery or otherwise when people are evicted from rental housing and the city of Cape Town is called in as the third respondent in the matter to provide temporary accommodation. Even the temporary accommodation is on the periphery of the city, which really, it takes people far away from opportunities, from social and economic opportunities. And so it's really at this stage hard to say who is this affordable housing for, or who is this housing for? Who is this development for? Looking at the city has earmarked 11 sites in the inner city for affordable housing in 2017. And it's been 5 years, Zainab, that there has been no groundbreaking. And that brings us to the question, then who is this for? Because there's a waiting list full of people. People can't live in a waiting list. They have to live in homes. And this the housing crisis has really become so bad because communities have not been a part of any of these developments. And even when we can comment to some of these housing policies or the developments as such, people are really still in the dark as to who is it for. Right now, we're sitting with an affordability crisis due to COVID-19. Many people are left without income, and also many are evicted because they cannot afford to pay rent. And so this housing crisis is deepening. And I think that it's not only the affected people who should be a part of driving this, Zainab, but also social movements who have been fighting and campaigning for housing in Cape Town, that they also be a part of of driving this affordable housing, social housing, low-cost housing, because we really do know what this housing crisis is about.
Radio 786 100.4 FM, that's the voice of Karen Hendricks from Reclaim the City. We also have joining her in studio Axolile Notywala from Movement for Care, and we're talking about registering on the housing waiting list and what that means. And of course, you can send your questions to 0786 10 11 12 or call us on 021 699 1786. Now, Reclaim the City occupations have provided housing to people who would have otherwise been left homeless and displaced. The two occupations have proven that providing housing closer to economic opportunities improves the quality of life. But now, if one looks at really the fact that the waiting list is so long, does it mean that if I'm on the waiting list that I qualify for accommodation?
So these are some of the questions I think that many people have, because even if you are at the top of the housing list,
does it mean you qualify?
You don't know, because it depends on the type of housing that is being provided. It might be someone else that qualifies, that's not even at the top of the housing list. And so I think this is why there's sometimes problems and challenges, and because of the housing list, and there's conflicts amongst the people that are homeless and that are in need of housing. And I think we believe that there needs to be a bit more transparency in terms of the housing list. The housing list needs to say that if you're at the top, you qualify for this house, or you don't qualify for this type of house, so that you also know, and you also know who is going to benefit if you do not benefit, so that you don't just see someone that's at the very far bottom of the list benefiting without you knowing. And these are issues that needs proper communication and proper engagement and transparency.
Absolutely. Karen, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd also like to add to what Axolile has just said. Yes, particularly when it comes to people occupying land or buildings. Right now, occupations, Zainab, is actually housing opportunities. It is seen to be housing opportunities for people who are living in these buildings or on these occupying pieces of land around the city. Equally with those who are living on the street and are homeless. So these it's seen as housing opportunities. And another aspect to that also is that government have always been blaming people living in these occupations or people occupying land for their own failure to build housing. I mean, since the dawn of democracy, since 1994, not a single affordable house has been built in the CBD or in these inner city suburbs, for example. And this is what really deepens this housing crisis. It is because there are no housing opportunities for people, particularly to live in well-located areas like Woodstock and Salt River and Greenpoint and Sea Point, because government have always been blaming people and calling people queue jumpers, we are land hijackers, and so forth. But when are they going to build this housing? If only they had built this housing that they're speaking about.
Now, there's a WhatsApp comment that says, even if housing is available, it gets taken up by those who come from outside the city. How true is this?
So this is the challenge with the lack of transparency in the housing list, because sometimes it is people that are on the housing list that are able to benefit. But if those that are on the housing list aren't able to see who else is on the housing list, then they might say it's people that are benefiting from the outside. If it was transparent, you could go on the housing database and you could see who is there and where they're from. then these issues wouldn't be happening. But we also know that there are instances where politicians and political leaders use those opportunities to sell houses to people that might not be on the housing list or might be at the bottom of the housing list. So I think if in these cases people are able to see, then they might be able to stop some of those issues.
Okay, and then we have another a question that says, but our foreigners get first choice from African neighboring countries.
So as per the housing criteria in terms of who can benefit and who should benefit, it does say that you must be a South African citizen. So if it happens that it's someone that's from a different country, that means something is wrong. Someone has done something wrong there.
Okay.
So people from neighboring countries would be able to benefit from housing that is rental accommodation, but not necessarily some of the state subsidized housing.
Okay, and then here's a question. Thanks for a good program. Is this about the RDP housing or is it rent-to-buy housing? Please supply more information regarding the rent-to-buy housing for persons that earn less than 22,000 rands a month.
So at this point, Zainab, it's not really clear which housing is for what. And particularly around the inner city, it never really would there be RDP homes being built there. And also, when we're speaking about the inner city, for example, it would be social housing or market-related housing.
Okay. Axolile?
Yeah, so there's also I think the province has introduced like a new policy around housing, which I think we all need a bit more information on. But I think it speaks to that gap of people who could benefit, who earn between 1,850 and 22,000 rand. And so I think it's some of those people that could benefit from the rent to own type of housing.
Okay. Now, earlier the first question was based on whether or not the fact that the criteria is that you should have never owned a property, right? And what if you lost your job and now no longer own this property? The person follows the question up with saying that it's advised that you may contest the fact that you don't qualify for a state house because you owned a house but lost it. But when will you be able to do this? After 22 years when you are not called or notified, or is it now whilst waiting?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the difficulties, because sometimes you might register on the housing list and you put your contact details there, and there's a housing opportunity and your contact details have changed, and therefore there's no way for you to be contacted. So I think it's important for people that have registered to regularly check up
and update
and continually update their details.
Okay. And then I've been on the list for about 18 years now, but still nothing. So what do I do, as I am living in the yard now? I got more than 15 years.
That is a problem, Zainab, because the housing register, someone being on the housing register or needs register for 18 years, some people are even more than 30 years on the housing needs register, it does not mean that the person qualifies for housing. And also, since no housing has really been built to meet this backlog, it is a problem for many. It is a problem for many. But I also just want to add one thing, is that I feel that communities or people who are on this housing database and have been on this housing database for such a long time should really demand that government makes this database public so that people can see exactly which housing developments government is currently busy with and which years.
Okay, we have a limited time and there's one more question that says, how do I apply for the rent to own? Please, I'm working. What would be the actual steps? We have about 2 minutes left.
So I think some of that information you can find both on the City of Cape Town's website, and you can also find it on the Western Cape Provincial government website. In terms of how you apply for that. Okay. But there's that criteria of having to earn between that amount of 1,850 and 22,000 rands.
Okay. On a final note, Karen, would you like to leave the listeners with anything in terms of being on the housing list?
So with the housing database, I'd just like to say that it is time that communities start standing together and people start standing together. And once again, I'll repeat myself to say that this housing needs database should be made public. It should actually be a demand from people who are waiting for such a long period of time for housing. And then also, when it comes to this housing needs database, we feel that there's still this pushback from government. It's almost as if they're blaming those who are waiting for the much needed housing instead of building the housing.
Axolile, from your side?
It's been a long struggle, and it should not be a long struggle. I think it's up to everyone who doesn't have a home, who is homeless, who doesn't have property or land, to stand up and ask and fight for these things. And there are organizations that are available to assist. The Funagwazi, Reclaim the City, the Movement for Care, we are trying to get to that point, to make sure that those that are in power are able to deliver, because we have put them there to do that.
Absolutely. And that's how we come to the end of another edition here on Radio 786 on the Couch with our weekly assembly with Ndifuna Kwazi and of course Reclaim the City. And we say many thanks to our guest Axolile Notywala from Movement for Care, as well as Karen Hendricks from Reclaim the City. Just a reminder that you can you can either contact Ndifuna Kwazi's housing clinic line at 062 352 9372. That's 062 352 9372 if you'd like more details. You can also email Ntombi at nu.org.za for any further details, but visit www.evictions.org.za. Then just a reminder for you that the 10-week advice assembly still continues, and that's of course at the Bertha House, 6769 Main Road in Mowbray. You can contact the number 065 993 1324 or email yusra at nu.org.za. That is if you'd like to learn the law that governs evictions, and this is at absolutely no cost. It's a 10-week program that started on May 18th. And that's how we end this edition of On the Couch with myself, and I've been from my guests and myself. We bid you Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Radio 786. Hear the difference.